Hello, and welcome to tonight's video or webinar, training webinar. And the title of this program is How Do You Measure the Financial Return on Your People Investment Strategy? So my name is Ethan Chazen. I am a New York-based organization development coach, and I'm going to walk us through the different strategies that you can employ to build an amazing workplace culture, which will fuel your organization's financial profitability. So, what is culture? I mean, no matter who you talk to, everybody's got opinions and definitions, and it's fair because culture is often a very difficult to pinpoint characteristic or attribute of an organization. But there is a way to actually define what culture actually stands for in any organization. And so allow me to share my very, very concise summarization based on my own experience, having spent 20 years in corporate America leading organizations through pretty significant transformation. And then the last 15 years coaching and consulting with hundreds of organizations on culture transformation. Culture, in its most elegant form, is how your people interact with each other. It's how they get the work done. It's how and to what extent they're engaged and involved in the work and understand how their work contributes to the success of the organization. It's how they feel. Yeah, feelings matter. It's how they perform, how they produce every single day, in whether they can bring their authentic selves to bear for the benefit of the organization. So having said that, the first question that begs asking, and this really is the groundswell we've seen slowly over time, organizations are starting to say, I understand that culture is important. I'm just not really sure how to measure it or where to start. Well, let's dive into that. You start with your people because your people give you your only lasting competitive advantage. You may have heard culture eats strategy for breakfast. For sure, if you don't have the right people, strategy gets you nowhere. Equally, culture is significantly more impactful on the success of your organization than operational efficiency. Why? Because everybody has access to the same tools of the trade. Everybody has AI. They all have EOS systems. They all have technology, which is now not any longer the great competitive advantage. It's the lowest common denominator. It's at a minimum what you need. So your people, as always, or more so than ever, drive the success of your organization through successful culture. So start with the intellectual capital, the contributions that each of your employees makes to increase revenue and reduce cost. And you measure it. What are the new products, new services, new feature functionality that your employees have been responsible for? When have they been successful in selling your other products or services to existing clients, or selling new products and services to new clients? So there's an aspect of that, not on the sales side, the sales is easy to measure, but on the client engagement, account service, customer care side, less front office sales roles and more back office. Also, on the cost side, reducing cost in your organization, which also contributes to financial well-being. What process improvements? What redundancies have they streamlined? How have they determined, by owning their work, how to do their work more effectively? Critically important. The way to formally solicit your people's ideas to generate revenue as well as reduce cost is to develop a formal employee idea generation program. What does that mean? On a 2-year basis, you're going to pre-fund on an annual basis, put monies into the cost required to start up employee ideas. Then you're going to create a cross-functional team, multiple functions in your organization, marketing, sales, HR, finance, and people from all 3 levels, senior leadership, middle management, and frontline staff. You get those amazingly onboard VIP brand ambassadors into an idea generation committee. And then you create a formal process for receiving ideas from employees, evaluating them, communicating back to employees, and ultimately every idea that is approved to proceed, the submitter of that idea becomes the de facto project manager. We can talk more if you'd like to schedule some time to discuss this. Your intellectual property portfolio, patents, trademarks, copyrights, that has direct straight through financial impact or bearing on your portfolio, your portfolio of assets, which can be monetized. So that's another consideration of your employee's contribution to that intellectual property. I want to share with you a concept. I am what's called the certified 6 boxes coach, and it's a methodology of coaching that's predicated on increasing employee productivity or outputs, measurable aspects of employee work. You'll see in this diagram that there's really 2 parties who are equally responsible for employees performing at an optimal level in terms of the outputs. On the bottom line, you see the employee level. Those 3 boxes constitute employee responsibility. Number 4, skills and knowledge. That's what they bring to the table. Selection and assignment, what they choose to work on, what they're assigned to, their roles and responsibilities, their KPI metrics. And then box 6 is their drive. Are they intrinsically motivated? Do they care about the products or services? Do they feel like their work has meaning? And their preferences. Top line, boxes 1, 2, and 3 of equal import are the organization's responsibilities. And a lot of times when it comes to employee performance and productivity, the organization will say, well, we hired you, here's your job description, go forth. The organization has ultimately equal, if not more, responsibility to ensure employee performance by setting expectations, delivering constant, positive, constructive feedback. Also, delivering the tools, resources, guidance, anything the employee needs to perform at the highest level. And then to consistently work with that employee through coaching, mentoring, and sponsoring. What are the consequences of their work as an individual? How does their work fit into the team performance and productivity that they contribute to, and the organization as a whole? So you can see that there is a marriage between an employee-employer, call it the employee-employer contract if you have no better frame of reference, but the 6 boxes collectively represent the totality of individual and organizational responsibility for employee performance. Next up, when I'm often asked to come in, it's typically because an organization, either on its leadership team or individually, they've identified people are underperforming. And so when I'm asked to do a human capital audit, which we'll talk about in a bit, but the human capital audit is me doing a 360 holistic view of, do you have the right people in the right role right now to ensure they perform and produce at a high level? In other words, it's succession planning, but with a very strict set of metrics and/or criteria. The first is it reduces cost. To go out and recruit somebody externally is significantly more expensive than when you look internally for people who you've identified as possessing the potential and all of the other considerations to be advanced into a more senior level role with more strategic responsibility. It also serves as a retention strategy, right? When you promote from within, we know that it enables your top stars to want to stay with you, as opposed to, I don't see any career mobility or upward trajectory here. I'm going to bounce. I'm going to go somewhere else. The way to formally structure this is a 3-pronged program. It's coaching, mentoring, and sponsorship. Let me explain this, because the sponsorship typically comes in with professional services like legal organizations, law firms, and/or accounting firms, consulting firms. Sponsorship is a senior executive, a senior member of the leadership team, has taken responsibility for a specific rising star that senior leader has said, I sponsor or put my name behind advocating or championing this individual being promoted or considered for promotion. Mentors are people who possess very, very lengthy background experience. They provide career and professional development guidance, advice, and counsel, but it's not specific to the individual being under their tutelage. It's not about work performance. It's about more longer term guidance. That's mentoring. Coaching is specifically actionable guidance given to somebody in their role to assist them in performing in that set of roles and responsibilities. So I suggest, and I architect coaching, mentoring, sponsorship programs that are intended to retain top talent and is probably the most effective tool for career and professional development planning purposes. Gets me to the next point. Imagine this. You start working in an organization, as part of the orientation process post-onboard, you are assigned to a coach. You are assigned to a mentor. Not a sponsor, not yet. But it's the coach and mentor working together behind the scenes with this new individual to help the individual develop her or his or their own employee career and professional development plan. Remember, you're hiring top talent, so they're going to be intrinsically motivated to want to own their own plan, but you're going to get guidance and counsel from your coach and your mentor in the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months, in the next 2 to 5 years. This is what you're going to do for optimizing your career and your professional development with us. The other is you set aside an annual employee development funding program. What does that look like? Well, I can't give you the specifics on an employee-employee basis, but know this. In the aggregate, the methodology is every employee, once they get their career and professional development plan finalized, approved by coach, mentor, leader, assigned to, they then now have an action plan. And that action plan requires monetary input through professional association memberships, on the job or offsite training, certifications, accreditations, any and everything that constitutes an additional funding that's required for a career and professional development is in that set aside people strategy budget. And again, if you haven't done this, or you've done pieces of this, a formal employee investment strategy is not a 1 year, it's a 2-year commitment. And you'll notice I say this repetitively, whatever program we're talking about, it's got to be 2 years. Why? Well, it's pretty obvious. The first year is trial and error. It's lessons learned. It's debrief. It's get it out there, see how it works, and make modifications and changes. But you only have at the end of the year one functional data set of your workforce. You need a second year to refine, to pivot, to shift, but also the second year of data gives you a point A to point B, or start and date considerations in determining the quantifiable, measurable impact of such a program. Okay, another way to measure the employee return on investment is the quality of your hires. This is something that you look at in terms of your organization, not looking at individuals. What do I mean by that? Across your workforce, you have, for every person, KPIs, key performance indicators, goals that you set. I'm hoping, and this is part of when I conduct a human capital audit, I look for individual, team, and organizational goals and the alignment that they have. So every single employee, the percent completion of their total KPIs. Let's say an employee has 5 key performance indicators, 5 goals. And throughout the year, they've achieved, in total, 80% completion or success rate. Okay, that's great. You just normalize that, or you spread it out across your organization. What is our company-wide KPI achievement? So let's say as an organization, you're at 70%. You can also split that out and look at a more finite slice of that 70% KPI completion and say, by division, by location, by team, by leader. And so you get different insights because that's going to feed into multiple human capital feeds in your organization. So one is your career and professional development planning. This feeds into that. The other is into your performance reviews. The other is into your specific coaching and mentoring. So everything I suggest in this webinar today has what we call multiple positive impact. Annual retention. What's the percent on an annual basis of your retention? Company-wide, by location, by manager, by division. And you really want to see your retention because we know this. Typically, if you have to replace an individual, it costs you anywhere from 1.2 to 1.4 times base salary for the aggregate advertising recruiting cost in terms of money spent on the recruiting, the advertising, the staff requirement to speak with candidates. So that's a reflection on the quality of your hire. I have been called into organizations to do training with specific locations or departments. For example, customer care. There have been call centers where they've had on an annualized basis 2 to 3% attrition rate. What does that mean? Every single person in that call center left on average 2 to 3 times in a year. Yeah, it sounds almost inconceivable, and yet that is what happens in toxic workplace cultures. So employee referrals, remember, when you hire the right people, I'm going to talk about a shift in mindset in your talent acquisition for next year. But before we get there, we know that the most engaged, the top performers, your rock stars, are going to refer other people just like that. So why not monetize them, incentivize, create a great culture where they're predisposed to want to do this? It creates what we call in the trade employee engagement. I'm sure you've heard that term, you're sick of it, but that's what a manifestation of it is. Great people want to bring great people they know into the organization to share in the joy and privilege of being in that culture. This cuts down the cost of your recruiting factorially, and it increases the quality of your hires. It allows you also, when you're bringing in people to the organization who are already close to the people who are your rock stars, it facilitates team building and collaboration. Again, as you've heard me say, if you don't have a program or you've tried this before, you're going to re-up or reinstitute it on a 2-year basis. One is to get it out the door and to learn as you're doing it. And year 2 is to be able to implement all the lessons learned, the changes, with a view towards gathering a second year of data to do comparable analysis. Probably the single greatest discovery I made, spending 10 years researching what it is about great places to work. I spent a decade researching over 200 countries, 7,000 organizations. And I said, what, if any, attributes do they share that allow them to create financially high-performing organizations built to last? The one attribute they all shared, regardless of country of origin, structure, industry, sector, competitive, makeup, composition, didn't matter. They had compassionate workplace culture. So that was my second book, The Compassionate Organization. My greatest lesson coming out of that was this: world-class organizations no longer use job descriptions. That's not how they're wired. They say, we'll teach great people on the job. We're looking for attributes. So what are those attributes or characteristics of rock stars? If you only use the prevailing 20th century approach of we're going to recruit people based off a job description, roles, responsibilities, preferred background, college degree, all of those predetermined, finite, arbitrary, or not very helpful insights, you're going to get people who say, show me the money. They're only in it for the compensation because they're not of a certain set of behaviorals and personality factors. There is a subset of the greatest attributes that the top performers all possess. And here's what they are. They like to solve problems and they think critically. They feel comfortable serving in a leadership role, but they can also step back in a subordinate aspect and be a coach or mentor. They're intrinsically or self-motivated. They're great on their own. but they're phenomenal team players. You can actually, in the recruiting process, doing behavioral interviewing, where you ask them to demonstrate these traits in prior work and how that'll reflect on their ability to do the work you need them to do. They're people who are engaged. Their engagement is reflected in volunteer work, community activism. They're lifelong learners. They do have an ethical construct. They have a moral compass. And the other aspect of great learners is great employees, is they're fast learners. What you need to do is move away from the insanity of interviewing, recruiting, screening based on job descriptions, and finding people who possess as many of these amazing attributes as possible, and then they'll learn on the job. They'll challenge themselves. They'll challenge each other. They'll look for new ideas to generate revenue for you. They'll look for ways to reduce costs and be more efficient. They'll advocate for you in their social and professional networks. That's them. So what do I mean by that's them? What do I mean by those are great employees? What I mean by that is that they're engaged because of their construct, their characteristics, their behavioral style, to go above and beyond in nearly every instance. When they come across a client that's threatening to leave or a client that's unhappy, they go out of their way to make that client happy. When they have a lead that you're struggling to convert or move through the conversion pipeline, they step up. They do what it takes to get that person from prospect to pre-qualified lead to highly qualified lead to first-time customer to repeat client. That's how they're hardwired. They love, love, love the challenge of new client acquisition and client renewals. That's why I call them rock stars. So these rock stars, over time, they are your VIP brand ambassadors. They're going to go out there, if you've got a great place to work, and they're going to be apostles, raving about your organization's culture. You should come work here. I'm so happy. They allow me to do this. They give me this. I am capable of being my full and authentic self. They have meaningful, deeper level diversity, equity, inclusion. I feel a sense of belonging. My work is valued. They're going to go out and spread the word. And that's going to build your organization's reputation. And I'll refer to that shortly as a Q score. One of the things that I've seen is organizations do not know how to strategically incentivize their people, coach them, train them, develop them to network. Let's throw that word networking out because I actually don't like it. It's a term from the 1950s when Russia and US had ICBMs pointed at each other. A network is if you knock this computer out, we're all tied together so the other computer kicks in. Networking is a precursor first step, which is required. It's like kissing frogs, to finding more meaningful relationships, meaningful meaning, revenue generating. So here's what you're going to do for every employee. I told you before about a set aside funding program for employee development. One of the aspects of funding is for their professional affiliations and memberships. So let's say they belong to a few professional organizations. You look at the annual dues of membership and you total it up for that employee. The employee's average hour of cost. How do you figure that? Simply, annual salary divided by 2,000. 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, you give them 2 weeks off. So that'll benchmark the average hourly cost of compensating them to go out and work these networking events. So the cost of them, the cost of meetings, transportation, the cost of the dues, you add it all up, that's the total cost of their participation in an association. How many clients have they generated through that group? Divide the number of clients into the total cost. That's the cost per client per event or networking venue. And that's how you start to think about the value of them going out, landing new clients as VIP brand ambassadors, and the cost associated, which leads to ROI. So having said that, I hope you're starting to kind of understand the importance of your culture's contribution to your people's performance. They're not separate. Many organizations I work with, they don't look at them as one and the same. They are intertwined. They're yin and yang. They're not separate considerations. So here's where the kind of the manifestation of that is that the interconnectedness of culture and performance, productivity, and financial profitability. Your Q score is taken from the Q score, a quotient score created by a marketing firm called Name Labs. The Q score, quotient score, is a monetary measurable value of, typically it was starting out an artist, a musician, a sports figure, their reputation in terms of measuring it. So where's the value in this? It saves time and increases the likelihood that a rock star will hire you. I'm going to say something about this. Your Q score in terms of great reputation, in terms of acquiring and retaining top talent. One of the things I've heard ad nauseum over the years, oh, Ethan, there's a war on talent, especially since COVID. You know, it's incredibly hard to find top talent. These Gen Zs now, don't get me started. Believe it or not, there's no war on talent. The only war on talent is for organizations who have crappy cultures. World-class organizations with phenomenal reputations, they never struggle to find, bring in, and keep top talent. So building this Q score of amazing reputation for culture allows you to already get your brand's reputation out there into the marketplace. Not just your clients, but amazing employees know about you. They like what you're about. They understand your values. They trust you before they even engage with you. It's why people understand Patagonia and Tom's Shoes and Chobani and Kind and Disney and Marriott and Nucor Steel and DuPont and Gore and Morningstar. They have all built amazing reputations. So here's how you mathematically perform a Q score measure. Familiarity multiplied with popularity. So what does that mean? In your respective industry or sector, when you gauge employees or candidates and you say, how have you heard of us? Yes or no? There's familiarity with your reputational brand. And then you multiply that by how popular, how much of a preference people have for your culture. That's your Q score. So you benefit from having a great Q score in so many different ways, monetarily, financially. What does it look like? People are more receptive to give you their business as a first-time client, for sure. Amazing employees are going to choose you over some other competitor as a great place to work. Governments are going to, whether it's conscious or unconscious, whether there's bias or not, governments are more predisposed to give you a contract, all else being equal, because in the RFP process, you've already established your place of business as an amazing partner. When you're looking for research funding, again, that reputation of being a great place to work, it has exponentially more value than you would realize. So now I want to walk you through a human capital audit. So many years ago, I noticed that my clients were struggling because they bring people in for a job, roles and responsibilities, but they didn't understand how to have a formal way to put people into career and professional development or consistently train and develop people for future success in the roles they were hired for and other roles. So here it goes. I developed a web application called the Human Capital Audit. I hired an HR consulting firm to build out what I designed. And it allows you to go beyond assessing and holding employees accountable for the top 5, 6, 8 roles and responsibilities they perform. What do I mean? 75 cents out of every dollar you spend on your people, your payroll, is wasted. Why? Because you hired them off that job description. Remember that? With a finite set of roles and responsibilities that required a finite set of skills, background, experience to perform those tasks. But we know with the rapid, significant transformational rate of technological change, we know about chat, GPT, AI, augmented reality, virtual reality, neural marketing. We know about all of these technology drivers that are forcing you to reconsider on a much more frequent basis the role that people serve. Remember, the succession plan, building that bench. Do we have the right people in the right role right now and moving forward? So the human capital audit is the 75 cents out of every dollar you waste on your people is what were they not using that they possessed in their portfolio of skills when you hired them? Education, background, training, certifications, accreditations. Are they published? Do they have language proficiency? Did they grow up in culturally diverse households? All intellectual property, all of those things, which is the totality of their awesomeness, you ignored it. You ignored it because you were seeking that round peg to hammer into the round hole. The shape of the hole changed now with constant transformation, chaos, and shifts and changes in lifestyles, preferences, consumer behaviors. All of that is requiring a workforce that's constantly capable of adapting. So how does that look? You start out with, this is just some screen caps of the human capital audit, but it applies conceptually to how you approach your talent management. Veronica Brown is a fictitious employee in your company. Doesn't matter whether you have 5 of her or 50,000. You can apply this human capital audit to everybody. First off, what are the core responsibilities Veronica's doing now? And or you can also include what are the responsibilities that you want her to take on through training, coaching, mentoring, certifications, accreditations, going back to school. All of those things, what she's currently doing and what she could be doing is listed under her human capital audit as a responsibility. Then you'll see associated with responsibility is an action. The action, remember the 6 boxes? The 3 boxes that map to the employee, the 3 boxes that map to the organization. The action is a joint set of requirements between employee, herself, or him or themselves, and their coach, mentor, their leader, maybe project team members, but it's a collective responsibility, employee-employer contract. And then things like time frame, when you're looking to implement this new responsibility in her re-architected roles. Contingency is just a fancy word for anything in Veronica's wheelhouse or anything as an organization barrier from her completing that new responsibility. And just monitoring it. What the tool also provides is another set of dialogue with your employee who you're talking to regularly. Employee ROI. You probably thought I'd be starting this earlier on, but here we are. Employee ROI. I said before what the cost construct is. The framework is 1.2 to 1.4 times base salary because you have to factor in bonuses, cost of living adjustments, benefits, training, transportation meals, all that stuff, the totality of what it costs to get great people to perform and produce at a high level. That's the cost side of the equation. Where's the value side? Where are the contributions? So starting point, just to size the bread box, and I don't suggest you do this, but other than as an exercise for learning, get your sea legs, take the total revenue, coming up on the end of 2024, your total organizational revenue, divide by number of employees, contract, consultants, full-time, part-time, I don't care, all of them. You now have average revenue per employee. What do we know? That's a pretty effectively useless strategy because it's an average, which means statistically speaking, some people are going to be overperforming on that. Some are going to be underperforming. Some have sales roles where it's easy to measure it. Some are back office folks, so it's harder to measure the value, excuse me, of their contributions. Here's some ways to kind of start out. You have average revenue per employee. It's just a starting point. Now you know the percent completion rate of each employee's KPIs. Remember that? I said before, let's say hypothetically your organization conducts this KPI completion exercise. You know, everybody comes 70%. The percent completion rate of an individual's KPI determines how that employee was close or not so close to their monthly, quarterly, annual goals. Then the kicker is Employee ROI is not not in isolation. What you want to do is you want to look at employee percent KPI completion as a consideration for their role. You're going to assess that in their teams that they work on, and it's part of the organization's overall success. So what are their contributions in terms of success rate with KPI completion, individual, team, and organizational level? There's 3 ways to measure the quality of your hiring. This is your responsibility as an organization: performance, productivity, retention. They're the 3 most critical factors that you can leverage in determining your quality of hire. Performance. In a calendar year, it's easy. We're coming up on the end of 2024. Anybody, all the people you hired this year, what was the average of their performance ratings? That's a performance metric to indicate quality of hire. Productivity, again, aggregate percent KPI or goal completion. Retention, remember I said before about the customer call center challenges? The percent of new hires you have successfully retained on a run rate year-over-year basis. And I look at it as a three-stage approach: pre-COVID, COVID, post-COVID. So up till 2020, 2020, 2021, maybe even 2022, and then you have 3 years of anecdote of data, 23 and 24. Take the average of the performance, productivity, and retention grades your organization received, and that's your quality of hire. So let's say you hit an 80% on performance, 75% on productivity, 70% retention. Congratulations, you've got a 75% quality of hire. And the beauty of this is, once you determine the quality of your organization's hiring success, you benchmark it. You benchmark it against your top competitors in your industry and maybe other industries or sectors. Now we get to where the metal hits the road, or the rubber hits the road. Worker autonomy. It is beneath human dignity to treat a person as if they're a mere cog in the machine, per Gandhi. Worker autonomy is a 21st century construct. It means you're empowering your people to have the greatest possible control and ownership and responsibility for their work. Why? Because they're closest to it. You do not know their work day in and day out like they do. They're closest to your clients, your vendors, partners, all your stakeholders. This is the driving force with why I say you need to shift your talent acquisition to hire the best, because you're going to give them the tools that they need. Get out of their way. Watch the magic happen. But this is such a powerful force, empowering your people through genuine autonomy. It requires nothing short of an almost near cultural transformation. In total, you don't do it piecemeal. You design a culture transformation strategy, and it's surrounded by your people. And the autonomy we're going to talk about shortly is a driving force. What do we know? Thank God that 20th century pyramid command control structure that came out of the industrial age, with multiple layers of reporting and administration and hierarchy, which was built to ensure control and keep people down, that's dying. Sorry if you don't want to hear it. We're going to a flatter, less bureaucratic, less tiramisu matrix, less layered organization. It's more matrix. We're shrinking down the number of layers, and we're expanding out the number of contributing people. That's the beauty of worker autonomy. Great book, if you haven't read it, Daniel Pink's Drive. He talks about measuring. You can survey, you can literally do this tomorrow in your organization. You ask every employee, by manager, by leader, by team, division, department, location, 4 questions in an anonymous survey. 4 questions to gauge degree of autonomy. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 is low, 10 is high. How much autonomy or control do you have, Jane or John Doe, over what you work on, how you do it, when you do it, where you do it, and who you do it with. So these 4 questions, you're going to know pretty quickly at every single individual's sum total assessment of how much or how little autonomy they have. And that, by the way, gets baked into their current professional development planning. So another consideration is survey. I gotta say, so many organizations absolutely stink at this. They just do. I'll ask them, what is your systemic formulaic approach to surveying your people, to put a finger on the pulse of how you people are feeling at any point in time? And invariably the answer I'll get is, oh, we conduct an annual survey. Do you know how stupid that is? Why are you even bothering? Do you know how insulting that is? First of all, once a year, don't bother. Second of all, the better question is, why are you surveying them? What are you attempting to get out of them? What are you going to do with the information? And how are you going to communicate that back to your people? A survey mechanism in and of itself is de facto useless. It should be formal in terms of every month, every quarter, every year, for sure. But there should also be a constant 365-day-a-year communication with your people. So, employee sentiment survey. If your intent in doing this is to implement change, and of course it is, so I'm making a rhetorical statement, before you go about the process of implementing the surveying to lead to the change behaviors, you got to have a starting baseline of understanding. So you survey the state of existence of right now, how happy, how dissatisfied, how frustrated you're saying right now at this moment in time. That's your benchmark. And then you go about having a predetermined cycle or frequency of check-in. Who are you going to check in with? How are you going to check in with them? What are you asking them for? Gathering that information to then take it back, apply it, and change your culture. All the while communicating with your people, because one of the biggest misses that organizations don't do, but they could so easily, is communicate before you start, when you start, as you're doing it, and at the end. Communication in any organization, just like in any relationship, is the greatest single contributor of success or failure. Once you get the feedback from people, you can aggregate it up, down, across, in, and out. And the beauty of the feedback is now you can apply people's feedback into performance reviews and people's KPIs and compensation, especially people in supervisory roles. The client feedback is the same model. It's the same model. It's soliciting feedback constantly from your clients and gathering it with a predetermined, predefined set of this is what we're going to do with it. Employee feedback is also a contributing data set in determining the ROI they give you. Getting feedback from people when it's meaningful, when it's genuine, and when it's acted upon, there's such value in that. But yet we never think of formulaically taking that feedback and saying that's another factor in how we, as a formula, how we come up with employee ROI. So I want to say thank you for taking time out of your super busy schedule to come and hopefully got to the end of this webinar on how you measure the monetary measure of your organization's culture. How do you implement change on that? And as a result, how are you able to measure your employee ROI in terms of their performance and productivity, which leads to ultimately the end desired outcome, your profitability. One of the things I want to share with you is please go to my YouTube channel, the Chazen Group LLC. There are over 400 videos in all my playlists of other tips on building great culture, engaging and empowering your employees. You'll see there is a playlist on how to develop an amazing workforce. I believe there's 20 or so some odd videos that gives you counsel, advice, guidance, and best practice. Having said that, I'd also like to thank you for taking time out of your schedule, and I'd like to offer you a complimentary consultation. Reach out to me, and we'll schedule some time to dive deeper on any of what I talked about, or maybe other things that you're interested in knowing. So thank you so much for your time, and I wish you much success in building an amazing culture that truly unleashes all of your people's untapped potential. Thank you.